Well, here we are on our 7th, 8th, 12th episode of Gods and Rock, and we've got two really interesting guys tonight. We've got Chris and John, who's probably played more gigs than the Rolling Stones, Motley Crue and Long John Baldry put together. Welcome, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, Keith.
So, looking forward to this because you guys got a great history in both sort of various types of bands and sort of different types of music and stuff. So John, do you want to just tell us a bit of your musical heritage and
Okay,
background?
well, it goes back quite a bit, actually. I can hear from my accent I'm from Belfast, but I'll skip. Well, in fact, I started off playing in a band that was kind of handpicked by the Students' Union at Queen's University, and we used to be the kind of house support band for any bands that came over on a Sunday night, to play. But they were not the big name bands. It was bands like Brinsley Swartz, do you remember that?
Pub rock band, yeah.
Carol Grimes, and then you had people like the Chieftains and Edgar Broughton's. The Edgar Broughton band would have blown you, out of the room. The volume.
What a band!
Yeah,
I love them.
But then I came over to study in the UK, and I joined a jazz fusion band, and we played a lot. We got some funding from the Greater London Arts Association. Every time we played in London, they subsidised us, so there was an incentive to play as much as possible. We had a great little residency in a pub in Islington, the King's Head, which was a theatre pub, and we just were having an hour because the theatre would stop at 10. All these people would pour out, you had a ready-made audience, But so I did a lot of gigs with that band for a couple of years.
So what were they called?
They were called Swift.
Okay.
And then I went overseas. I worked in international development. I played in some interesting sort of bands then, African and Americans, doing all sorts of music. But currently for the last few years now, I'm back in the UK, permanent basis. I'm in a band called The Alibis, which is a sort of soul funk genre band. I wouldn't call it a tribute band. It's like it's a bit like Chris's band. You have a genre of music, so you can pick from a lot of different bands. And of course, that soul and funk thing goes from James Brown in the 60s and so on, right up to right through the 80s, 90s. You're getting more recent funk bands in the 2000s and so on. So we tend to, at least we can have change the repertoire. In fact, you have to do that, don't you? I mean,
you can't keep it.
If you play, and we're playing a lot actually. We're playing more than as much as we want.
So what sort of places do you play?
Well, it's mainly pubs, and it's funny because being a sort of dance-oriented group, it used to be like we had a band before this, which finished during COVID. And it was it was called Yacht Club, and it was doing like yacht rock, Steely Dan, Hall & Oates, all that stuff. And we thought, you don't really need to play dance music in a pub because people are sitting around all the time. But what we've found, especially since COVID, and why the band has gone into more soul and funk, people, it seems, and pub landlords, want you to play music, and people get up and dance in the pub, and so our music is quite suited to that, obviously. And but I like the fact that as a bass player, some of the best bass lines in soul, rock, whatever, are in that genre. So I get to play some great bass lines, so it keeps me happy. But I think the key, particularly if you're playing regularly, is you gotta keep changing the repertoire or people get bored. I can't understand. If I was in a tribute band, can you imagine if you were in an Oasis tribute band?
Not really, no.
I mean, no, but think about it, after 1 year, and maybe you're playing like 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights, 5 nights a month, you're stuck. Because they're not making any more new music, are they? No. So it's Wonderwall. How many times can you play that without getting
Once.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about tribute bands before we get on to Chris. I saw a poster the other day outside of Mould advertising the John Denver tribute band.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
That's a new one, isn't it? I haven't seen that before.
I imagine waking up one morning and saying, "Oh Christ, I'm going to have to do my John Denver."
I know.
So Chris, what about you? What's your sort of band history and?
So 3 bands down south, which were all kind of trying to do original material. The pick of those would have been the Jealousy Freaks.
Yeah.
So we played some quite good venues in London. The ones I remember most fondly, there used to be a club in Covent Garden called the Rock Garden.
Oh yeah.
Played there, mate.
Yeah. So we used to get on there on a Sunday night, but because it's Covent Garden, it would be really full. And the shows went really well, so have good memories of those. And we played the Mean Fiddler with like literally almost no one in it. Other good shows I can remember, like the Bull and Gate. It's quite a decent pub in N17, not N17, up North Way. So the singer Greg Bell worked for a record company, still works for a record company, so he had access to facilities and stuff. So we recorded our demo in Battery Studios, which was a proper comedy day. Some unfortunate apprentice engineer got forced to produce us. And my memory of it is of being a bit unprepared, and I think the room we used, Brian Adams had not long since recorded everything I do it for you in there, global hit, there's the piano in there and all that, and I was lying on the floor trying to finish. Because in those sorts of bands, you can play half-finished songs live. It didn't really matter if we just repeat a verse or something. But I had to finish the lyrics as we were recording them. So that was tons of fun. I can never really remember why it petered out, but it did. 2 of the guys in that band I'm still quite close to. Merv's in a brilliant band. The bass player's in a brilliant band called the Albinos. I love their stuff. They haven't done anything since COVID, but brilliant. And the keyboard player, Patrick, who's an amazing player, is in a band called Vortex Floors, which have just done their first gig in London. And I feel like saying to him, it sounds like a sci-fi carpeting company. So that was all good fun. And then moving up here, I basically didn't know anyone. And I had a job where I sat, basically a freelance writer sitting in a room on my own for a year. So I basically didn't know anybody at all. And then through football, I met some guys who were into music, and we formed a band that played live for 13 years. So they were called the Dags, and we played mostly in Chester, North Wales, occasional forays elsewhere. 5 different drummers, but the rest of the band was basically the same.
So I was going to ask you, how do you keep a band together for 13 years? Takes some doing.
You probably don't
Pacing
play
yourself,
every week.
I don't know. I think there's a big thing there, like the band I'm in now, Blah De Blah. What does Blah De Blah mean to us? I think it's a bit like there's lots of people in pub bands who all they want to do is play well together as a collection of people on different instruments, listen to each other, and put on a show that people are going to enjoy. It's Friday night, you're out, you want to have a good time, and you want the band to be good, don't you? So I'm really connected to that, and everything else is just blah de blah, So if you turn up and you haven't prepared, or if you're a bit chaotic in some other way, I'm just probably at an age where I just don't have any time for that. I just want it to be about the music, and if you think it's about your solo or whatever,
Go and play jazz.
Yeah, go join another band,
Yeah, but the interesting thing about your band, it's a bit like the Alibis. We're a genre band.
Yeah.
So his is like the same, blah 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 ska, and so you've got a huge repertoire you can choose. You can select from, and over quite a period of time.
Yeah, I feel we've had to come to terms with being a bit niche. So, places John plays, I look what they're up to and I bring them up. So, my friends just played there. Could John have a listen to our stuff? And, an unnamed place in Chester said to me, "Oh, ska, we couldn't possibly do an evening of that." I mean, why not? It's music for dancing, and, it's about sunshine and happiness and, good times. So I think it's a bit disappointing. But, blokes in rock bands will have this. They'll have known this for years. They'll always have known this. You're put in a box, and you're going to struggle to get gigs. basically.
And what I like too about your band is that there's not very many bands doing that. I mean,
Yeah.
people associate particularly with pubs. There's a kind of repertoire, isn't there?
Yeah.
Like Stereophonics, The Killers.
Yeah.
You know, a bit of
But
this,
that's
bit of
changed,
that.
isn't it?
But there's still a lot of it. There's still a lot of it.
Well, that is the new, if you like, classic rock.
Yeah, yeah.
There
Yeah.
used to be Bad Company, AC/DC,
Yeah.
I don't know, whoever, Deep
But-
Purple, Black Sabbath.
Because people,
It's now, it's, as you say, it's the Killers. I guess
and people
Oasis.
say to us, no one's playing your sort of music. You know, we're doing like Stevie Wonder and James Brown and a bit of Chic and Luther Vandross.
Uh-huh.
No one's putting all that together in one thing. You're getting a. So we did and this is an amazing thing. For the first time ever in my life, 3 weeks ago, I did 3 gigs in the one day with the Alibis on a Saturday, kicking off at 11 o'clock, a festival in Holywell, and then going down the road for a 2:30 gig in the Boar's Head in Holywell, and then hanging around a bit and then going off to Connors Quay, a big sort of community pub there. Absolutely knackering. But people just are getting some. It's not fresh in the sense that the music's been there for years. It's just someone's trying to put a genre together, and you're not trying to be
There's
Oasis.
not a lot
you know.
of bands, especially locally, from what I know, that do that sort of stuff.
No, that's what people say to us.
Same with you, Chris. I mean, do you know,
Yeah.
do you ever get invited to play ska festivals or? Ska
Yeah, I mean
events?
they do exist, and I mean it's more like modern scooter rallies, I suppose.
Yeah.
There are some really good. I mean, I'm quite surprised. You know, I live in Manchester, and there seem to be only like 2 really big ska bands. Baked Alice ska, and they can fill band on the wall, and people will be dancing on the tables. I went one, so they play there kind of a New Year-ish around there, and fabulous atmosphere. You know, absolutely, the place is jumping. I forget who the other one is, but
There's one around us, one around North Wales somewhere, and I can't think what they're called, but it's a play on a Welsh word.
yeah.
And I know they've played at the Sun. When you talking about you play, they've definitely played there, but I can't think of.
Yeah,
I'll tell you a funny thing. Most of our gigs actually are in North Wales. Isn't that interesting? You
We
know.
like our music.
Yeah, I mean,
appreciate
the
music,
live
yeah.
music in pubs and stuff. We do, you know, private parties
Are you
and so on.
finding
But
the venues there aren't as many venues and more bands these days? Because
Yes.
when I was in bands, I mean, when I started about 18 or 19, there were about 3 bands in Wrexham. And now you've got a generation, I guess, of people my age who've had kids and all the rest of it, and they're all forming bands.
are they? Because the
Yeah,
thing
because
I've noticed,
There's loads of bands around the Wrexham area.
the thing I've noticed, Keith, is like when I see a band playing, say in a pub or something, generally they're older guys, you know, 60 plus, and I don't see a lot of. I guess when we were younger, you know, being in a band was exciting, wasn't it?
yeah.
And it was like a social thing as well, you know. And
There's
I
quite a
don't
few
see so many. I don't see. Do you, Chris? I don't see so many young kids.
I don't know. The open mic nights, like if I was a publican, I would do that as well. You know, how to fill your pub on a Tuesday night. It's and you can actually see.
The Sun do a great one on a Wednesday. So.
Yeah. I got the first ones I went to in Manchester. I was just blown away. I was like, I'm waiting to see like the next Ryan Adams or something. People coming out and knocking out really good original material.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that. I mean, I absolutely take your point about it doesn't really matter. The band, the set list always seems to be the same, which can be a bit disappointing. But
I've noticed there does seem to be this current young generation, let's say the 20th, something. I am seeing a lot of very, very talented young people of that age. Like, for example, that Holywell Festival I mentioned, there was maybe 4 stages around the town, and there was a lot of young kids, you know, particularly women. I'm finding there's a lot of really talented young women singers. And, you know, doing solo stuff with backing track, you know, using their mobile, you know, going into the PA. This sort
Well,
of
there's a
thing.
place in Hollywood. I've just had a look now and I can't find it. I think it's called the Blossoms.
Oh, that sounds familiar. Yeah,
Oh,
there's
and
one
they-
called the Feathers as
it's
well.
the old vaults I've played
They
there.
do.
Yes,
I
that's
mean,
right,
I've only
yeah.
found out through my son a couple of days ago. They do a open mic, I think, on a Sunday for kids, you know,
Yeah.
young people under 18.
Yeah.
And you know, it's encouraging people, or youngsters to get up on stage, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of, but I certainly see it around Wrexham. They've had a couple. I think in the last 5 or 6 years, they've had a couple of bands who've made it. You know, young lads. There's a band called Neck Deep. Yeah, they've played the festivals. They've been over to the States. I think they played Download this year. And there's another band you want to keep your eye out for. They're just breaking through now, called the Royston Club, which is a club in Akrivaya. Believe it, I didn't know that, but I passed the sign a few months ago. And they've just been on an arena tour supporting some fairly big bands. They're like 19, 20.
But you also see,
like
think about it, you look at Sunday Magazine, the colour supplement, you see all the bands that are advertised. I mean, some of them, like, I'm just amazed that they're still going. You'll get the Moody Blues, you know, you get...
I see it every month in Mojo.
But it's the majority of big touring acts were the old established band going back to the 70s.
Yeah,
they
it's
are.
quite extraordinary. Where's all the new... I mean...
There is a lot of new stuff. I think, I don't know, I'm not judging what you like, but if you're like me, I'm not really into a lot of the new stuff that's going around. I guess it's stuff you hear on Six Music, you know. I don't like a lot of it. It's just doesn't excuse the pun, doesn't strike a chord with me. But those bands are out touring, and I guess it's because I don't have that interest in that sort of stuff. I don't really go and see them. But I mean, there's some good stuff on Six Music that I hear. Like, I'll check that out. And it's a guy called Willie J. Healy, really talented lad. And there was a band a few years ago called Yak. And I went up to Leeds to see them, and they were good, but they lasted a couple of albums, and then thanks very much.
Yeah. So sorry.
Don't go. You interrupt me, Viv, it's fine.
No, it's fine.
Honestly, I don't mind. You do it all the time. You do it all the time.
I know, exactly. So where would be your inspirations for music then? What sort of, you know, bands kick you off and sort of drive you forward into playing in bands and stuff? What's inspiring you?
So the first album I connected with personally, not my brother or someone introducing it to me, was Regatta de Blanc.
Right.
And I still think some of the tracks on there, I say, it's super special. I mean, a lot of it is the drummer.
Yeah.
I think he's a really interesting guy, isn't he? Stuart Copeland. I think he lived in Egypt and the Lebanon, and he picked up the Arabic rhythm. Is it Baladi? Is that how you say it? I think that's on the third beat, which is what reggae is. So people always say it's the reggae feel, but so I think if you listen to like a bang average song like Everything She Does Is Magic, you know, that's a big hit.
Yeah.
I don't really care about the rest of the song, but listen to the drumming, it's absolutely crazy. So I loved all that, and I think Andy Summers has his moments as well, like The Bed's Too Big Without You. You know, if you're a bit bruised or whatever, and you wanted to make that sound on an electric guitar, you listen to what he's doing, he's sort of hammering on at the neck. It's a fantastic sound. I haven't really, before or since anyone heard him do that. The solo on Bring On The Night, it's a 2-note guitar solo.
But Andy Summers had didn't he play with somebody like Kevin Coyne back in the day?
My God, Kevin Coyne.
Yeah, someone like that. I've got a couple of albums from the early 70s. And it might not be Kevin Coyne, but
he was an angry,
but he
an angry guy, wasn't he?
But Andy Summers had a good musical pedigree, you know.
Yeah. I think the sort of rhythmic stuff released him, because I was never into punk. I don't like the snarl, and I like constructive things. You know, like No Woman, No Cry, Get Up, Stand Up for Your Rights. You know, sort of that thing. And they're like, so their early punky stuff like Peanuts and all that. It's a bit of fun, blasting away. But actually,
when they started, they were sort of like white reggae stroke punk, weren't they?
Yeah.
The program's called Gods of Rock, right? So I'll tell you my Gods of Rock story, if you like. Back in New Year's Eve, 78, I think it was.
Good year for music.
Yeah. And
your favourite?
I was doing a gig to make some money because it was New Year's Eve, and I put a band together. And the sax player said, I needed a keyboard player, and the sax player said to me, I know a keyboard player, I'm sure he'll be free, we'll get to him. So we did the gig, and after the gig, you know, it was about 12:30, we're more or less packing up, and the keyboard player said, anybody fancy going to a party? You know, I said, well, it's gone midnight, it's New Year's Day, why not? So we drove to Bayswater, a basement flat, and came in, and there was only 4 people there. 3 members of police, and,
Wow.
and Sting's wife, Frances Tomilton,
Yeah.
comes from the same part of the world as I do. And at that point, I'd seen the police once on the whistle test doing Roxanne, which was their first hit. And they were slightly well known, but he was unmistakable. And they'd had a small party and everybody had gone. So this pianist had been working with them in Germany, and that's how he knew them, and he had been invited to the party. So we land in, and so there was just the 4 of us and the 4 of them. So we're talking, of course, being a bass player, I started talking to Sting, and he invited me into his room with his bass, the old Fender Precision was up showing me his bass. I saw a little photograph, black and white, of him from Quadrophenia with the white
that's right. He was the face,
hair
wasn't
and
he? The ace
suit,
face.
the mohair suit. And we had a great chat, and after, and I spoke to Frances because she was, we had a lot in common coming from Northern Ireland, and we just left. September that year, I got married, and Hazel and I went to New York. So we saw, oh look, police are playing at the Chelsea Hotel, the famous Chelsea Hotel. So we said, let's go. So we're standing outside and waiting to go in, and a door just near us opened, like maybe a stage door, and out walked Sting and 3 other people. And I was just about to raise my hand and say, hey! And then I said, no, I can't do this to him, I mean, the last 9 months, they had about 2 or 3 singles. They've broken America in the process. How many people will he have coming up to him say, hey Sting, do you remember me? So I left it, but then I thought about it so many times afterwards. I was on our honeymoon, and he would have placed me 9 months earlier in his flat in New Year's Eve, And I always regret not, following up, because it could have been a hell of a good honeymoon.
It always amazes me. I mean, I think Roxanne, they released it twice and it flopped both times.
Yeah.
And same with Can't Stand Losing You.
Right.
And it's those sliding doors things, isn't it? The record company just believed in it though, and I kept having another go.
And they were great for, police numbers were great. If you were doing pubs and so on, you wanted a bit of money. All you needed was guitar, bass, and drums, and someone who could sing relatively high. I mean, you could always bring the key down. But I actually did have a little trio, played a bit, guitar, bass, drums, because you're always trying to keep it into an economical unit as much as possible. Go in with the least gear, try and get the most money, and get out there, and go home, forget about it.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, John, you being sort of a guy like she jazz, that Sting, when they'd done that Bring On the Night tour, that band, your Pino Palladino.
I've just been to
Kenny Kirkland, Wayne Shaw.
I try and go to the Antibes Joan Lapin Jazz Festival every year. Branford Marsalis quartet was playing, So he had Branford Marsalis, he had some amazing players.
Omar
Darryl
Akeem.
Jones, was it Omar Akeem drums? Yeah. So like, if you're talking like Chris's, I mean, I came up from a different direction. I mean, I grew up with Hendrix, Cream, and when I was a teenager, what was important then was like, the music, wasn't it? I mean, you had all these instrumentalists from Clapton to Hendrix to Keith Emerson on the organ, Ginger Baker drums. This is post-Beatles, obviously. And then I gravitated into jazz in my late teens, early 20s, and Jacob Pastorius, bass player, is still my main guy from with Weather Report and so on. And, so I came out of that kind of
but a lot of those guys
that
you mentioned earlier, the British musicians, they all had a grounding and a background in jazz, didn't they? A lot of them
certainly
played
jazz and blues. I mean, have I seen some early stuff with Jack Bruce
with Graham Bond?
Yeah, and Jack Bruce came into things. I mean, he was exceptional. I mean, he'd been to the Royal College of Music in Edinburgh. Could play cello, classical cello, piano. Bass.
He got a great voice too.
And what a singer!
And I loved his voice. And I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves for his voice.
And when he went down to London, people regard him as a cheeky bugger. As this tiny guy, and pushing himself. But God, he could play. He was far more advanced than a lot of guys.
I got to see him once, and he was great.
But it was blues, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was blues and kind of jazz.
Lexus Corner.
Lexus Corner.
Saw him in Chester at the Gateway Theatre.
Wow, you're kidding.
And he just played the piano all night.
Yeah.
Just played the piano. I'm sure he did.
What a voice!
Yeah.
So you're right.
I think it's worth mentioning Marley as well, isn't it? Like, you're talking about 1978 being a great year. I think he was in London from about 75 and playing, and they're all like loving it, aren't they? People like the Clash used to go and see him,
that's right,
and
yeah.
we're kind of adopting that style. And they were the Wailers were the first reggae band on the Whistle Test. And I think before then it was slightly naff music, you know, and he was the one who made it, you know, something that people into alternative culture could enjoy, and mainstream people could enjoy as well. So, and those songs stand up, don't they, if you listen to them now?
Yeah, all that sort of Marley stuff, it's just absolutely iconic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you can't, I think you've got to be a very cold person not to love Marley. It just moves you. It just,
yeah. If you go on YouTube, there's stuff of him just messing with an acoustic guitar, singing something like Redemption Song. I mean, he has a beautiful voice, doesn't he? You know, it's so emotional and spiritual and all those things. And he's just a mega influence, you know.
So it's going to get messy. We mentioned Marley, then the beers come out. But
I mean, a lot of the reggae
the splits.
a lot of the reggae that people were exposed to pre-Bob Marley was just commercialised. So like Ken Booth, wasn't it?
Snaff,
that sort of stuff.
I mean, Marley had a single out in 62, you know.
Did
and
he?
it was like novelty music.
Oh yeah, Desmond Dekker.
Yeah.
Millie.
Late 60s.
Yeah.
So Chris, they were all saying that sort of reggae ska world would be, you know, how quickly did you get into the reggae and the ska? And
Pretty quickly. I mean, I grew up in a seaside resort where there weren't many people making music, you know. I was in Devon, so where you get your influences from is back in the day, before everyone was travelling so much, you know, Scousers, Cockneys and people like that would come down and work in our town in the summer and just sign on for the winter. So you'd end up sort of meeting people, and so, you know, my funny enough, there's the thing about Big Brothers. My mate's big brother, he was really into, he introduced me to things like Rainbow and all that, but then he moved on to reggae. So he was playing things like Steel Pulse, Handsworth Revolution, CB200, all those great albums. And we couldn't help but look up to them a bit, you know, because they were they had motorbikes and girls, and we were still about 14, and it wasn't happening for us.
I had a pedal bike and no girls.
I had a pedal bike and just, you know, a lot of aspiration. You know? So I mean, I think those basically it's like people coming from up north and London and living in our little town had a big. That's where you would find things, because everyone else around that time was just listening to Elton John and you know ABBA.
It's the stuff you heard on the radio, wasn't it?
Not there's anything wrong with ABBA or Elton John.
Yeah. I mean, my brother Guy is a big influence to me in everything, and his taste was things like I don't know if you know the live album Hot August Night, Neil Diamond. Yeah. So if you ever do a thing on live albums, it's worth looking at that, because it's a slightly naff. There's some slightly naff things with Neil Diamond, but he's a brilliant singer, great songwriter, and a lot of those songs have been used again and again. So I think "Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon" is the best scene in Pulp Fiction. They're dancing to that. Yeah. And there's a couple of others that he wrote. I mean, things that I'm discounting Sweet Caroline, but so I would listen to that as well.
The Monkees.
Yeah, Believer.
Last Train to Clarksville, and I'm
Red Wine was the one I was thinking of. You know,
Red Wine,
And I actually prefer Neil Diamond's version of it, because I got a sort of mixed relationship with Ali Campbell's voice. You know, I don't know. We have done a couple of. This can sound ridiculous, but we have done a couple of UB40 songs, and I prefer our versions, because our singer George from Wrexham, he's got a lovely characterful voice, and if he sings something like Food for Thought or 1 in 10, you know, I do think it is effective and people listen.
I do think 1 in 10 was such a great song. It's still such a great song. You know, I remember buying it on single when it came out, and you know, loved it.
Well, hardly any bands came to my town, but UB40 did. And I saw
them. They come for the holidays, aren't
they? They were playing a gig at the 400 Ballroom. I didn't go to the show, but they were playing Space Invaders. You know, I thought, mate, you're famous. You know, pressing the buttons.
Just out of interest, John, where would you go for a live album? Have you got any sort of live albums that, you know, you listen to that you just think that is such a great, iconic album? I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, it's funny you should say that, because a thing came into my head almost immediately when you said that. And I'm going back a very long time to when I was a student. And it was Van Morrison's Too Late to Stop Now.
Right.
And I hadn't given, funny enough, I mean, this sounds weird. I mean, coming from Belfast, coming from Northern, you know, Van's a Sir Van is a,
Yeah.
you know, in everybody's heads, you know, he's been so around for so long. And I mean, Them was a great, you know, R&B band. And I hadn't paid much attention. There was Brown Eyed Girl and everything else. And then I was watching something, I think it was on TV, and it was a film of Van, and of course he had strings, he had a really good band, and really great arrangement, and he was at his peak. I mean, I'm talking about early 70s here, when I was, you know, 19 or something, and I just thought, wow, you know, I mean, this is going at another level, you know, and went out and bought the album. I mean, that was him really, I think, right up there, you know, doing his, coming out of Astro Weeks, and did some Dominic's preview and all this, and you know, with a live little, you know, orchestra, and sort of linked to that as well. The other one was the Last Waltz.
Yeah.
The band.
The band,
What a live gig. Has there been in terms of rock, I don't know if there's a better live gig. I mean, everything, those guys could really play. They had the feel, and the guests, they would bring on Joni, they could play with her doing her stuff, Neil Young,
Neil Young was in it,
Van
Bob
Morrison,
Dylan,
and they all played so well, you know.
And they brought Ronnie Hawkins on, didn't they?
Yeah.
There was a guy they first played with, Ronnie and the Hawks.
Yeah, and it was kind of, there was this kind of atmosphere too, because it was their farewell
Yeah.
They had about
gig,
three
and
really good
Scorsese,
singers.
Martin Scorsese filmed
Scorsese
that.
did the film. It was about 1976, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that,
Yeah.
So I'm going back a while, but I have to tell you, 2 weeks ago, I was at Ronnie Scott's, and I saw this amazing woman I've followed since '93, Michelle Indigocello. She's a young black American, real, you know, energy, highly politicized, amazing bass player, slap bass, and brilliant rhythms, brilliant songs. She could rap, she could sing, you know, and then in the 90s she was a phenomenon, really. And then I bought her first 4 albums over the next 5 years, and they were just phenomenal. She's bringing in jazz musicians playing with her, you know, and then she kind of went very odd. It was a kind of, she was starting to sound English indie, like an English indie band, and her voice had changed. I just stayed away from her for just, not stayed away, I just moved away from her over time. And about 6 months ago, I saw a clip of her latest album, which is interestingly on Blue Note, which is the jazz album, the jazz label. And I was knocked out. It was so unique. And I went to see her at Ronnie's, and the audience were just, you know, on their knees. It was because it was an interesting lineup in terms of, like, the front 3 were her sitting, and she had a little keyboard, and she had a bass she sometimes picked up. And then to one side of her was a drummer who's a brilliant singer, and the other side of her was a solitary singer, another male. And then behind, which is unusual, you had a guitarist behind her and a bass player behind her. And out on the side, sort of between them, was the keyboard guy. And when the 3 of them sang, it was just beautiful, because these guys were singing like Marvin Gaye. You know, they sing really high. She was actually the low harmony when she did it. And just people were just, it was so emotional, you know, because it's, you know, Ronnie Scott's, it's like everybody's looking in on the stage, and they're kind of out a little bit, you know, and it's very highly personal. So if you can imagine it completely packed, and it's you're very vulnerable if you're going to get out there and just, you know, sing into a microphone in front of you, play a little keyboard, and the 2 guys. I mean, it has to be. There's no room for, you know, making a mess of it. And wow, it was just so emotional and so. Beautiful. That's, to me, that's, for a live gig, that was one of the best I've actually been in. You know, I saw the Van on television. I saw The Last Waltz, you know, as a DVD. But actually being in Ronnie's that night, and it was only, as
just
I
a
said,
bit
like
special.
2-3 weeks ago, it was earlier this month. Not absolutely knocked out by her, you know. And she's evolved so much. It's extraordinary how she's evolved, you know. And she's uncompromising, despite the fact that, you know, she signed to Madonna's label, Maverick Records. Madonna obviously saw something with her back in the 90s, you know.
Okay. So, Chris, what would be your sort of standout gigs then?
Can I just say something else actually? Because I think there's something in what you just said about lost albums. Because I think that early Van Morrison period you're talking about, he did Veed and Fleece, didn't he?
That's right.
Yeah.
Like the record company deleted it for a bit. There was a time when you couldn't buy it, and it's got like Fair Play is just for me one of the finest bits of music ever put down, you know. And there's a couple of other really good songs in there. So I always think that's a great lost album. Again, back to this 78, 80 period. There's like the Thinking Person's Duran Duran, were called Fashion. And Fashion. They were so cool. They had one single called Love Shadow. Have you ever heard of that?
Yeah,
No.
I remember the band Fashion.
I've got their album. I've hardly got any vinyl. I'm not that guy. You know, I've got like 3 albums. It's in my attic. But I thought they were brilliant. And they're on Spotify. You can find them. Fashion. The album's called Fabrique. There was another one as well, like the bass player from the Fine Young Cannibals. Cannot for the life of me remember his name.
I know he used to move very strangely, didn't he?
Well, they both, they did, didn't they? Yeah.
Well, he
One leg was completely stiff and the other was completely the opposite.
Well, it turns out he's a great songwriter. So he connected with this New Orleans jazz singer, again, can't remember her name, and their album, it's got a rubbish name, Fried. Actually, the band was called Fried, and that was what their album was called. And you can't find that on Spotify. And it's so funky, you know, and it's slightly the lo-fi production. You know, I love that, not too glitzy. It sort of works for funk sometimes, you know. It sounds like in a club. So yeah, I haven't really answered your question. I mean, favourite gigs. I don't do. I know you're in arenas every other week, you two.
We were talking about earlier, weren't we? Yeah, we talked about arena
Really,
gigs.
is that great? There is a question I want to ask you, Chris, on the ska and the reggae front.
Yeah.
Now, I might be wrong here, but I've always had the impression it's difficult to play well.
So I would say the opposite is true. I think it's the melody. It's all on the singer, really. So there aren't like guitar solos in ska. There's fills, you know.
Yeah.
So no, it's I can't believe, like, because, you know, I've made a few mistakes in the last year we played gigs. I'm like, I'm a bit ring rusty. And I felt like in 13 years of playing like massive Pink Floyd solos, you know, I never had a note out of place. And so I don't know what I'm doing wrong, really. Maybe I need to rehearse more and take my own advice. But no, I think there's probably, as a guitar player, you're much more in the rhythm section. So trying to be tight with the bass player and the drummer. I like space in sound, you know. I like light and dark. So we have a keyboard player who
Black and white.
I don't like too much. So I stopped playing in different parts. I just hit dead strings, you know, because I want to emphasise the chorus or whatever, you know. I don't feel the need to do any more than that. So yeah, I don't find it that difficult to play, to be honest, compared to, you know, we used to try doing times like these, the Foo Fighters, when you're the only guitar player, you know, because there's 2 of them in the Foo Fighters, aren't there? So you're playing both bits, you know. So that's fiddly. And it's not like jazz, which is... John and I have actually played together. We rehearsed maybe twice.
Yeah.
And with a mate of ours, Bruce, and this like spectacular front person.
And tell them where we played.
It was at the Cavern, yeah. But we only
The Cavern in Liverpool. Wow, I've got to do this.
So yeah.
Were you the headline act?
We were actually.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like a. Well, you can explain, Chris. It wasn't like a standard gig.
It was a
like
charity thing, but we got shoved on. For various reasons, we got shoved on at the top of the bill, and so the thing I remember about the gig is like sheer terror, because we were playing quite complicated songs, like what's it called, Stormy Monday. You know, people who can really play the guitar can do wonderful things with that tune, and you know. We practiced twice, and then you're in front of like 200 drunk builders.
It was a strange set, actually. I remember we also did not the Animals version of
House of the
Rising Sun, but some band that Chris had heard of, I'd never heard of in my life, doing a different version of
Frigid Pink. They did a version, didn't they?
Yeah. And I ended up doing a lot of solos instead of the guitar. I was playing.
The funny thing about the gig, I don't know if I should say this or not. Please edit, you know, if you need to. But
no, we don't. Everything stays.
So the singer's like a very spectacular front person, and so John is in the video. The camera's just on her all the time, because you know, some front people just stand there and don't really do anything, and she's really moving.
Part of the job, though.
Yeah, she's really connecting with the audience, really moving, and you know, kind of compelling. And So I've got the video, and when we come on and she starts, performing, you just hear this voice go, "Fucking hell!"
Who was that?
It's some bloke in the audience, but John's doing this like super complicated solo, bass solo, and you can't. The camera doesn't move. He's like arching his fingers.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So John, who would you be your sort of inspirations and bass players?
Yeah,
then?
well, I mean,
because you've got a wide field there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
guys.
would have to be started off with Jack Bruce, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, and what a lucky, role model to be able to start with, and then I guess, people like Jacob Pastorius. From Weather, the Weather Report, singing.
Big fan of Weather Report.
Yeah.
He played on an Ian Hunter album,
And which one?
Ian Hunt, he played on Hunter's
Michael.
second solo
Really?
album, All American Alien Boy. And there's this bass solo in the title track. And it's just like, wow, okay. I'd never heard a bass solo before, and that was just, I had probably John Entwistle on my generation.
You mentioned the great Palladino earlier,
Yeah.
but in many respects, for me, he's a chip off of Jacko, and I'd always go back to Jacko. Jacko was so exceptional because he did things. When he brought that solo album out, I nearly give up playing, because I said, there's no way, this is so ridiculous. I mean, there was the tune he did, Portrait of Tracy, which was all harmonics, and you thought someone was sitting there in a Fender Rhodes, honestly, sitting there in a Fender Rhodes playing it. It was like nothing anybody had done. And then he does a Charlie Parker, Donald Lee tune at breathneck speed, playing the sax head, the head of it.
Yeah.
But it's not only that, then he goes into soloing, and his soloing is right up there with the best jazz soloing of a sax player. And then he brings in Sam and Dave and does a funk, Come On, Come Over. And then he does this crazy Latin thing, and then he's playing with vibes, and it was just something beyond what anybody had ever heard of, and it's still right up there. If you go onto YouTube, you will find kids, as a bass player, there's like certain tunes people want to master to show they're at a certain level. So one of them is Teen Town, Jacob Pastorius, and kids are still learning that and playing it off one of the Weather Reports. And Donald Lee, the one I just mentioned, you master the head of it. That's a task. To play it at the speed he does it, it's really, really hard. But to then solo over the chords at that speed, you're in another realm. And his was just so. There's been a lot of great bass players, obviously, since. I mean, Marcus Miller. I had the pleasure of seeing him live.
Did you ever see Jack Pastorius?
Oh yeah, I saw him with Weather Report,
right.
Hammersmith Odeon.
Oh, nice.
I mean, one of the things I remember about that was, one of the tracks came in. I think they had a Black Market or something. It was, and Joe Zawinul sort of had obviously, hit some electronics, and there was like a steam train, seemed to go from one side of the stage across, gathering speed, going right across the stage, and then they'd come in ding, 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 so on, Birdland and all the rest of it, So that's my man, And after that, it's hard to go beyond that. The guy died at, a hard. He's beaten up by a bouncer. He was just being he got into drugs and drink, and he was trying to get into. Probably force his way into a
He
club.
got beaten up, didn't he? Yeah.
And he ended up getting beat up, and that
Typical
was it.
bass
And I
player.
think he was in his 30s, Jacko.
He wasn't very old.
And the other thing was he wasn't getting gigs either, because he did a lot of great stuff with Joni Mitchell, obviously. I mean, Hazer and all those albums. I mean, he brought that in. He was a great match with Joni. Some of those things that really stand up for me still.
Chris, what were your guys on?
Guitar players.
Yeah. Well, it can be anybody in the musical world, but I think I'm always interested in when people end up with an instrument, who they look to for inspo and admiration.
So I'd say John Frusciante, because I like really rhythmic things, and
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to a Chili Peppers show and fought my way down the front and stood underneath him just so I could watch. I lasted about 5 songs. It was at the Amiens Arena, but I was just crushed and boiling hot. So he's just on another level for me. anyone who played with Bowie in any capacity tends to be amazing, don't they? So I like. Is he called Earl Slick?
Earl Slick, yeah. No, he played with Hunter as well, believe it or not.
Yeah.
He played on the album after All American Alien Boy, and he toured the album with him.
I think he was in Liverpool a couple of years ago, and I thought
He
I
was,
need
yeah,
to
he
go.
toured.
I don't know what happened. I didn't go. Bizarre ones like so there's a guy called G.E. Smith who's played with Dylan, and I like Hall & Oates because I like Daryl Hall's voice. It's very clear and soulful. So I ended up, when I was growing up, listening to a lot of that stuff. And I remember
You listen to watch the Daryl's House video?
yeah, I love that. If you ever do that, check that out. Bruce Willis's daughter, Ruma, I don't know how you say her name.
That's right. She does a great version of...
Sarah Smile, yeah.
Yeah, no, the other one, I can't...
Yeah.
I can't... Not I can't stand for it, was it?
Yeah, I know the one you mean, yeah. Yeah. No, she so Daryl's house, he plays with his friends and the band in his shed. I don't know if you ever watched it.
No.
I've seen some.
Quite a sophisticated shed, isn't it?
It's like a recording studio. But, so he gets guest singers in. I mean, some weird ones, like Kenny Loggins. It was really good.
But that was
you could
great,
really see them
wasn't it?
play.
That gig, they did the one that was in the movie,
Footloose.
Yeah, Footloose.
Footloose,
Yeah. It's a great song, actually. Yeah, I mean, growing up, I remember I had a VHS of a Hall & Oates concert that was on TV late one night, and I watched it, and they used to finish with a song called Open All Night, and the solo's epic in it, I don't think delay pedals have been around that long, and he does some really fancy stuff with it. But people, we were talking about The Last Waltz earlier. I mean, when I look at that, I just think Robbie Robertson, it's just him and the amp, isn't it? And the guitar. And he's squeezing it out.
Did you see that bit? Remember, didn't he bring Clapton on, and Clapton was doing Hideaway, the old Freddie King instrumental, and Clapton broke a string. He picks it up, Robbie picks it up, it's almost seamlessly, and carries on, playing it.
I think those guys, I don't, because I'm not a very technical player, I don't really respond to like really fast hammer-ons and things like that. I kind of like tone and hitting those blue notes, and you don't necessarily need to go fast to do that. And so people like G.E. Smith are brilliant. That's why like Dylan loves him. You just get a little burst. So yeah, I mean, if you're locally, there's some really good guys. There's a band called Dr. T-Bone. Their guitar player Tony McDermott is a tremendous player. Whenever I see them, I'm like, say, turn the guitar up, because that's what you want to hear. He can really cut loose,
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting to say Weather Report earlier on. I just love Steps Ahead.
Yes, Brecker. I me too. And I came to that more recently than when it was going on. There's a great track I love. I just can't remember the head of it. But the bass plays is it steps even? It might be called steps. Great. There's a great. The bass takes a lead in it. But it's not crazy playing. It's more like melodic playing. But that band, I mean, people rave about. I mean, the Brecker Brothers, and wow, quite rightly. In fact, I noticed Randy Brecker's doing a gig in Manchester.
Is he?
Later this month? Yeah, at the that hall. What's it?
Bridgewater.
Yeah. I think it's there, yeah. Oh no, it's the one that's linked to the music college.
Oh yeah, the Royal Northern College of Music.
Yeah, they have a beautiful.
It's a nice
venue
venue.
there.
Yeah, it's nice.
I think it's there, yeah.
But Chris, we went a couple of weeks back to the Band in the Wall.
Yeah.
To see
Easy Star All Stars.
Yeah, they were amazing. I think anybody who could take a genre like reggae and then turn Bowie tracks into that style, and the Beatles, and clever musicians.
Yeah, I've seen them twice. And the lineup's kind of half of it's changed. It's always got the bass player's the musical director, isn't he?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're so much fun as albums. I mean, people know, if you know, Radio Dread. Their covers of Radiohead songs are fantastic. And Triller, the Michael Jackson stuff.
They did some great.
I quite like their Beatles thing. I don't know, the Bowie thing didn't work that well for me because like Starman is such a perfect bit of music. You can't really do anything other than just play it straight, can you?
I tell you, sorry, it was interesting. We saw them, I think, on the Tuesday night, and I got tickets to go and see them on the Friday night, the live rooms in Chester. Just as I was getting out the car on City Road, who was walking up but the band, right? So I was about to pay for my ticket and I saw the bass player, the musical director. I said, guys, you fucking nailed it on Tuesday. He went, where can we get a curry? I said, oh, just up there, mate, because our Tuesday.
That's all very well, but where can I get a
yeah. Cheers, yeah.
I talked about, I mean, Gods of Rock again. I mean, and you mentioned Bowie there. Obviously, he was one of those, but I was lucky enough, as I said earlier, I go to Antibes, Juan Lepin Jazz Festival. It's not just jazz, because one of the gigs I went to back in July was Chic, supported by Corey Wong. And it's interesting, Corey Wong's almost like doing a Chic thing, but without the vocals. Sometimes he has vocals, but he plays that rhythmic guitar the way that Nile Rodgers does. This was amazing. This Nile's 70, I think, and they came on, and from the very first minute, they played one song after another without a single break, 3 minutes each song, and every single song for the next hour and a half you would have recognised. And I was amazed too, because I didn't know. I knew he had done songs for Diana Ross, for Sister Sledge, even Duran Duran, and Bowie, Let's Dance. But I didn't know he's done work with Madonna and Beyonce, and it goes on, and he just produces hit after hit. But this band, they used every inch of this, including him, every inch of the stage. They just moved all over the place, and the two women, and it's amazing to think like he's on the road again. He's one of these guys that a lot of American acts will do a continental, summer tour, European tour, and he's one of them. And so next night they were off somewhere at Nice, maybe, or somewhere else. On and on and on and on it goes.
Well, you talking about the sort of knowing all the stuff he did probably about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe a bit longer. Went to see Burt Bacharach.
Oh God! My God! I mean, what a songwriter.
And they opened up with a medley.
Burt Bacharach was playing in Llangollen.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
During the Eisteddfod.
Not at the Rising Sun, I hope.
Not at the Sun. No, he was in the pavilion. Obviously, yeah. I think he went to the Sun after. But they opened up with a medley. Probably had about 7, 8, 9 songs in it. Went on for about 15, 20 minutes, and I thought, oh well, that's it. I won't know anything else they play tonight. They played for 2 hours. No. There was one song I didn't recognise, and it was. I mean, he just came on, played a bit of piano. I mean, obviously you can imagine the quality of the backing band.
Do you know? I have to tell you, Keith. There was I watched a great documentary. There's been a few of recently since he died, and they were talking about Alfie, and the Scylla version. They flew him out. To London from America, and you can see the final one that made it, and I have to say, for Cilla Black, whatever you think of Cilla, she sang that.
But do you know what?
Well.
I love the production on that song. Some of those songs that Cilla Black did, I don't know, that almost had an eerie feel about it.
Yeah. Well,
and it was just the production.
I have to tell you. So the story about that was he was in a bad mood. He wasn't entirely happy that Cilla was doing it, and I think he'd already had Dionne Warwick doing it. And I guess Dionne Warwick did it for the movie, the Michael Caine movie, did she? I can't remember. Was
could have done, yeah.
Sounds plausible.
But here's the rub. They did 42 takes because he was so annoyed and in a stroppy mood. And he said this himself. He made Cilla sing it 42 times. And the joke was George Martin was sitting in the studio, and they finished it. And he walked past George Martin, and George Martin said, "You had it in the 4th take."
There's a few like that, isn't there? I heard about Dreams, the Fleetwood Mac track, and I think that's about take 42. And they just wanted to get that slight, almost imperceptible.
Yeah, but Chris,
defeat from
this was a full orchestra.
Yeah,
and Bacharach was playing piano, and if you see the clips of him, he's doing stand up, but he's being very, very. Waving his arms like a conductor, and it's actually too much.
Okay, fair play.
And he's like, it's almost like he's showing
Yeah.
I'm in charge. I'm the composer. It's my arrangement. I've written the music. Okay, Hal's written the lyrics, and I'm playing the piano. You know, and he really is overpowering in it to that extent. But I mean, what a legacy of songs.
Have you ever seen that Cilla Black did a version of Life's a Gas with Mark Bolan?
Yes, on the Cilla show.
Lovely, isn't it?
I remember it like it was yesterday because I was a big T-Rex fan back in the day.
Yeah. Again, it's like a really clear voice.
And they did a song called Mad Donna. It was on the Tanks album.
Yeah.
And then they did Life's a Gas together. It was brilliant.
Oh, it's perfect.
I mean, check it out on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
So, guys, before we finish this episode, which, to be honest with you, you know, we could go all night. I think we're going to go around the room. Give us all one album that we should own and listen to.
Oh my God!
I'm going for Bring On the Night, just because they're quality musicianship all the way through it. Listeners, that sound is Tumbleweed. Coming
Okay, I'm going to
across
give you
tables.
certainly. I'm going to give you two, but you know one of them. But the one you probably know would have probably been Stevie Wonder, Inner Visions.
Yep.
And the other one is 1993 Plantation Lullabies, Michelle Indigocello.
Right. I've not heard the second one, but I will soon have a dive into that.
I mean, she's intelligent, she's articulate, she's young. The energy is. If you see some of you can still see it live. Performances back then, and just the high energy and the musicianship and just something else. But yeah, Plantation Lullabies.
Cool.
No, feeling the pressure. So I'm going to say Matthew Halsall, who's jazz trumpeter. I tried to take you to see him,
you did.
and
a
load of people from work, and everyone said, yeah, we'll go. So I bought about 12 tickets and ended up going on my own.
Johnny No Mitts.
Yeah, but it was so good.
A big empty table.
I think I've seen him twice since. So he's got an album, I think it's called Colours, but he's I don't know, he's probably somewhere in his 30s and ridiculously talented. It's like Miles Davis is from Manchester.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Far too many to think of, aren't there? But
Go on.
I'm going to go with the first Moby Grape album.
My goodness, that's esoteric, isn't it? This is some choice, around the table.
Yeah. That is today's choice, anyway. It's kind of funny because a couple of weeks ago we did a podcast on our favourite debut albums.
Right.
And that was in there.
Wow.
And it's only an album I've owned for about 12 months. But Robert Plant was Skip Spence was the guy, I think. He was a front man with them. And he's always gone on about it. Whenever you see Robert Plant, this is a Skip Spence song, this is Moby Grape. So I've got to check him out. And yeah, so the debut album is a bit special.
Wow.
Are you going to have one, Viv? Or have you
Yeah,
had one?
I've done one.
Pay more attention.
Yeah. If you listen when I spot you
But you said you didn't say who the artist was.
Sting, Bring On the Night.
Okay.
That album. Right. And before we go, I've got a very quick Van Morrison and Chieftain story. I think I told you used to work in the Middle East in Saudi.
I did.
So you used to live on your little compounds. Yeah. Country where you can't drink. So everybody used to make their own booze, their own alcohol, and used to drink it on the compound. And without fail, every night, somebody around the pool would be playing Van Morrison and the Chieftains.
Okay.
So I've always got good memories of that track.
Yeah, I remember that album actually.
Great stuff on that. So, well, thank you very much, gents.
That's
it
been great.
Been a pleasure, an education.
Definitely good to talk to me about stuff that I just don't know anything about. So now I found it really
That's an
informative.
educational podcast,
Absolutely.
obviously,
I really enjoyed that. That was something special.
Yeah,
But you're right, we could talk all night.
Yeah, exactly.
Really
We'll have to do another. We'll have to revisit it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks
I really enjoyed
thanks
it,
for letting
guys.
us into your home and.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And
You'll be
good
cashing
luck
nuts.
with the podcast. I really liked it. Really enjoyed it.
Good.
Should we go for a curry then, guys?
We should, yeah.
Why not?
Excellent. Thank you.